Hamburg, the year 1620. That's a long time ago, right? Today we are traveling back those 400 years. 400! Can we even imagine that? Well, if you like, I will take you along with me. Welcome to Planten und Blomen. It means plants and flowers, the beautiful park right in the middle of the city. Just the other day, I mentioned that the history of this very spot stretches all the way back to the early 1600s. And today, I'm going to explain why. Are you ready? Let's catch the very last of the Japanese cherry blossoms over there. Okay, let's start our journey right here at the bridge. I've been walking across this bridge ever since I was a kid. It was designed by the exact same architect who built Hamburg's famous Kennedy Bridge. It carries you so effortlessly from one side to the other, taking nothing away from the beauty of the park. It's just a simple bridge. The man this bridge commemorates is the one who originally created the foundation for everything we see today. What was his name? Johann van Valkenburg, the Dutchman. He was here in Hamburg to design a massive city fortification, what we call the famous Wallanlagen. It means the ramparts. It was an epic ring of outer protection. Just imagine him walking right ahead of us. What would we ask him? Hey Joe, nice to meet you. What thoughts cross your mind when you look at the fortifications of Hamburg? Something like that, maybe? And what would he answer? This park tells so many stories. I could tell you hundreds of my own. I love this place since my childhood. When I think of Planten und Blomen, this park, I don't even know where to start. For me, it feels like I know the heartbeat of every single stone. Kinda like that. And maybe that's exactly the point. This park writes history, always evolving right in the center of the city. Everything around those places changed over the centuries, but somehow the park remains the core, like the blooming flower of the city. Maybe that's why people feel so deeply connected to this ground. Okay, let me try to explain what Joe designed here over 400 years ago. These massive ramparts. The entire ring of Hamburg city fortifications was armed with a total of 22 giant bastions. Each one was named after the city councillors who were in office during the 17th century, starting from the western harbor entrance and moving clockwise around the city. They were the bastions Johannes Albertus Casparus, Henricus Eberhardus Joachimus, now it's already getting tricky, Ulricus Rudolphus, Petrus Didericus David Ferdinandus, Vincent Hieronymus. Hieronymus! Good thing I brought the history book. Sebastian Bartholdus Ericus, Nicholas Gerhardus Dimarus Hermanus, and George Georgius. Wow! Did you count along? Yes, 22. The bastions were spaced about 170 meters apart. That's around 560 feet. The bastions themselves were 10 meters high, or 30 feet, roughly equal to a 3-story building. Their width ranged from 100 to 115 meters, which is 330 to 380 feet, making each bastion about the length of a football field. Now you can imagine. On top of that, there were 11 ravelins, designed to protect the ditch sections between the bastions. Ravelins? A ravelin, also known as a Waldstadt, is an independent, mostly triangular outer work in the fortress construction of the 16th to 19th centuries. It sits in the fortress moat in front of the curtain wall. That's the section of the rampart between two bastions, and serves to protect it as well as to flank attacking enemies. Very smart when you have to defend yourself or a city. So let's picture a giant ring built around the city with 22 triangles. Yes, exactly. The whole thing built so massive and high that some people didn't even think about attacking. Well, something like that. If you look at the city from above today, you can still see that ring. It's not there anymore. No, we are sitting in the park, but you can see that exact ring right in the middle of the city and the streets. I guess I need to show you. Yeah, we need a helicopter. Between 1679 and 1682, the fortress was expanded in all directions to secure strategic points. To the east and northwest, new advanced forts were built to protect the growing suburbs, and to the west, there was a natural high ridge into the ramparts. This prevented enemy artillery from firing down onto the lower city. To lock down the specific high ground and secure the harbor, an advanced outpost was built right on the banks of the Elbe River. And to the northeast, a massive dam was constructed across the Ulster Lake. Do you remember? The cherry blossoms, the white birds. This split the water into what we know today as the outer and inner Ulster Lake, connected only by a single bridge. Today we see the Lombard Bridge and the Kennedy Bridge at the Ulster Lake. Now it makes sense, huh? In short, every expansion was designed to keep enemy troops at a safe distance and use the natural landscape to the city's ultimate advantage. Imagine what that will look like today in a modern architect's office. So, in total, there were 6 major city gates integrated into the Kurtinen, the curtain walls of the ramparts. If you're wondering what a curtain wall is, it's simply the straight defensive wall that connects two bastions, like a giant stone shield between the main towers. To the west, there's the Milan Gate, Milantor, and to the north, Dammtor. Between these two, a narrow hidden gate led across the fortifications to a covered 1,000-meter-long path, about 3/4 of a mile. This path connected directly to the Sternschanze, the nice urban part. I think I told you before. The advanced fort on a hill north of the city. On the east you could find the Steintor and the Deichtor. On the south side, facing the river, were the Burgtor and the center, one of my favorite places. If you want to go to the Elbphilharmonie, Hafen City, Speicherstadt. Do you remember the old district of city warehouses? That was exactly there. Definitely one of my favorite places. Okay, back to the defense system. All of these gates were equipped with massive drawbridges that led across a moat about 70 meters wide or 230 feet. Okay, and what happened here over the next 100 years? Waiting, protecting, being ready, and in between the people's life. Are you still there? Still with me? I wish I could show you, There's a fantastic museum of Hamburg history here, by the way. They have an impressive scale model of the old city, which really helps you visualize how it all looked. A highlight of the model is the famous gate called Millantor around the year 1800. By that time, the military ramparts had already been transformed into green promenades planted with trees. Towering in the background is the famous church called Michel, Saint Michaelis, one of the Hamburg's most iconic landmarks. In the model, you can see that the old drawbridge had been replaced by a permanent causeway with a toll barrier. Right next to where that gate used to be, they later built a new guardhouse in 1820. And you know what? It's still here. It's been renovated and moved a little, of course, but after more than 200 years, you can still walk past it today, tracing the exact same footsteps as the people back in 1800. Love that. In front of the moat stretched the glasses, a long open slope. There are many streets. I will show you later. And along the outer edge of the water ran a covered pathway. You can actually still see hints of that layout today when we look at the bridge from here. It helps you imagine where those massive moats used to be. To protect the other side of the city, they used the water itself. In front of the bastions and the Alster Lake, they placed floating wooden barriers in the water, called Alsterbaum. It means Alster tree. These had only a single lockable part to prevent surprise attacks by boat. Towards the Elbe River and the harbor, things look completely different. Naturally, where water flows, you have to defend differently, sure. The fortifications in the south were significantly smaller, and the distances between the bastions were larger, because the wide river and its muddy floodplains made a direct enemy ground assault nearly impossible. Instead, the main harbor entrance was secured by massive bastions, dense rows of heavy wooden piles driven into the riverbed, and floating log barriers called Baumsperre. This barrier was a network of chained floating logs stretched across the shipping channel at night or during wartime, forming a tree wall called Baumwall. Do you remember? If you have ever been to Hamburg, that name might sound familiar. The subway station right in front of the Elbphilharmonie is called Baumwall, and the street. And that is exactly where this historic floating wall used to block the harbor. Just past that barrier, there's the lower harbor, which was divided into areas like the Jonas Harbor. It's called Jonashafen and Rummelhafen. How can I say that? It means something like hustle and bustle harbor. Yeah, that's it. The hustle and bustle harbor. Because it was so crowded. If you know where the famous Landungsbrücken, floating piers, you remember? That is exactly where you would have been floating back then. Okay, I need to show you one day. So, after a long period, some people began to believe that the city's future would be defined by lasting peace. As a result, around 1801, the old gates called Millantor and Steintor were demolished. To cut maintenance costs, the remaining drawbridges at all the gates were replaced by wide, permanent causeways. Almost all the advanced ravelins disappeared, and the heavy artillery was completely dismantled. In the autumn of 1804, the cannons were taken down from the ramparts, smashed into pieces, and the metal was sold off. Sure thing. Parts of the old ramparts, the open slope, and the surrounding areas were overtaken by urban growth, including buildings and windmills. Yes, windmills. On top of the Casper bastion, Kasparus. Hi, Casper. Someone even set up a refreshment place. Yeah. It reminds me a bit of the famous Livato ice cream. Oh, it was here, by the way, at the farmer main entrance of Planten on Blomen, the park, for so many years. Hopefully there will be ice cream there again soon because they closed some weeks ago. Yeah, this year, in 2026. I don't know why. Sorry. Along with the wards, the city lost its sprawling military infrastructure. Buildings like the commandant's office, barracks, arsenals, military bakeries, slaughterhouses, and specialized hospitals simply vanished. Over the following years, Hamburg's massive 8-kilometer, 5-mile, fortification wing fell into disrepair, with large sections being converted into public parks and planted with trees. By the early 19th century, the old ramparts that had saved Hamburg during the 30 Years' War were completely obsolete. They offered no real protection against modern artillery. To avoid being classified as a military fortress in the looming Napoleonic Wars, which would have turned the wealthy trading city into a prime target, the Hamburg Council made a historic and official decision in 1804. The so-called Entfestigung. It means the total demilitarization and removal of the city's fortifications. So we are here in 1804, and now it comes to the turn of history. A massive remodeling followed. First came the heavy demolition and earthworks. Workers began tearing down and leveling the massive defensive structures, the walls, bastions, and moats that stretched in that circle for nearly 8 kilometers, 5 miles, yes, around the city. The Hamburg Council commissioned landscape architects to transform these former military spaces into a green, new place. Avenues were systematically laid out, lawns were created, and thousands of trees were planted. By 1805, this work was already in full swing. From the ashes of the old fortress, the famous Wallanlagen emerged, the very parklands we know today as Planten and Blomen. Until the day that changed everything. The day history took a turn of pure irony. Just 1 year later, in the autumn of 1806, French troops marched into Hamburg. They found a wealthy city that had just voluntarily dismantled its defensive walls. As you can imagine, the French took Hamburg completely without a single fight. A few years later, under the brutal rule of French Marshal Davout, starting in 1810, the dismantling was radically reversed. They forced the population of Hamburg to destroy their parks and turn the city back into a highly armed modern fortress. Only after the French finally departed in 1814 could the transformation into our modern green spaces be resumed. Later. Isn't that incredible? We can see every day what's going on in the world. While some are dreaming of peace, others are already planning the next conflict, the next war. Whether in the big events of history or the small moments of our own lives, we never truly know what comes next. It reminds us to be grateful for what we have and for the people by our side, and to always be ready. Our everyday walk in life can suddenly turn into a long-distance run. And in those moments, it's just a matter of holding on and pushing through, knowing that everything will fall into place and the next good time will come. Now, let's go back to the year 1806. Years of terror followed, or years of challenge for the city and its people. Just take a look at a letter from local grandma, Antoinette Godefroy. In October 1806, she wrote to her grandson for his 25th birthday, and she wrote in French, because back then, French was the ultimate sign of worldly elegance. Later, she would be deeply grateful that her family fled to nearby Kiel, another city, to save their business. Have you ever heard of the Godefroys? They became one of Germany's biggest ship-owning families, later nicknamed the Kings of the Seas. Now, Kings of the South Seas. Yeah, they're magnificent places. Yeah, that's another story. So, what happened? A decade that demanded everything from Hamburg. We can pause here for a second. I will stay here for a moment on the wall next to the small stone stairs. These steps have stories of their own. But for now, I will take you with me into those dark 10 years. But only if you want to. Otherwise, feel free to walk ahead and wait for me by that large tree way back there. Can you see that? Near the entrance of the Radisson Blue Hotel, there's a beautiful tree. I will catch up with you in a moment. Wait for me. I think it's about past around 30, 50. Yeah, I'm still here. The years between 1806 and 1810 marked one of the most dramatic turnarounds in Hamburg's history. Virtually overnight, a proud, free, and filthy rich trading metropolis was turned into an occupied, economically choked garrison town. Just 2 days after marching into the city, Napoleon decreed the Continental Blockade, a total economic embargo against Great Britain. Most citizens couldn't believe it was real. But for a trading city like Hamburg, whose immense wealth depended entirely on commerce with England, this blockade was an absolute drama. Consequently, the city was ruled by iron French power. Corruption and exploitation became the new normal. The ultimate blow fell in December 1810. Hamburg was officially annexed and stripped of its independence. The free city was integrated directly into the French Empire as the capital of the newly created department called Département. My French is so bad, I'm sorry. Department of the Elbe River. Yeah, Département Elbe. The daily life changed radically. It was a time of pure shock, but it was about to get even worse. Worse? Yeah. The era of pure terror was yet to come. Following the official annexation in 1810 and the brutal reconquest by the French in 1813, by the marshal known as the Iron Marshal Davout, Hamburg was turned into a choked fortress. It all began when Napoleon lost his Russian campaign in the winter of 1812-1813, causing French rule across Europe to waver. In March 1813, the first open riots broke out into the streets of Hamburg. Panicked, the French troops retreated on March 12th. What followed was a brief sigh of relief. It was like that desperate gasp for air when you finally break the water's surface just as you thought you were drowning. That is how people described it at that time. That is how it must have felt. On March 18, in 1813, the Russian colonel Karl von Tettenborn, with his Cossacks to the indescribable ecstatic cheering of the population, Hamburg immediately declared itself liberated. During this euphoric phase, citizens founded the Hanseatic Legion, a volunteer corps of everyday citizens from Hamburg and other cities called Bremen and Lübeck, joining forces to fight against Napoleon. But the joy lasted barely 2.5 months. Napoleon was furious and ordered the immediate reconquest of this strategically city on the Elbe River. He sent his most capable and merciless commander, as I told before, Marshal Davout. So the Russian Tettenborn and his poorly equipped defenders quickly realized they stood absolutely no chance against the French-Danish army. On May 29, the Russians and the Hanseatic Legion evacuated the city. The very next day, on May 30, Marshal Davout marched back in. This ended Hamburg's brief breathing room, and the darkest chapter of the French occupation began. Hamburg was declared an official military fortress. By the winter of 1830, it was completely closed. In an act of sheer cruelty, Davout ordered tens of thousands of Hamburg citizens, anyone who couldn't prove they had enough food supplies, to be driven out of the city gates. They were cast out into the freezing dead of winter, and thousands of them marched straight to their death. What happened next? To find out, let's walk a bit through the park toward the exhibition halls, called Messehallen. You might know it as the home of the Polaris Convention or dozens of other major international trade fairs. The exhibition halls start just across the street, but we will stay inside the park, walking right along the fence line, past the bushes. And there it is, a quite easily overlooked memorial stone. And you can read The Departed. What is the story behind this? Some people say what happened here was a punishment by the French for Hamburg's brief rebellion. Others say it was pure military coldness. The French were simply clearing out mouth they couldn't feed to survive the upcoming siege. Whatever it was, the reality was horrific. After Napoleon was defeated at the massive Battle of the Nations in Leipzig in October 1830, the Allied armies, made up of Russians, Prussians, and Swedes, began closing in on Hamburg. Marshal Davout barricaded himself inside the city and fortified it to the absolute maximum. Then came December 1813. It was one of the harshest, coldest winters on record. And it was Christmas. The French marshal issued a decree. Every single citizen of Hamburg had to prove they had a 6-month supply of food. Anyone who couldn't afford this was ordered to leave the city immediately. We are talking about what seemed like tiny amounts of food, but for the countless poor families in the city, it was a financial impossibility, because many of the poorest citizens couldn't leave, and honestly, they didn't know where to go. The French occupying forces turned to brutal violence. About 5,000 citizens had already managed to leave, to flee, to neighboring Altona, which back then belonged to the Kingdom of Denmark and was neutral territory. The French didn't stop there. In mid-December, they even dragged over 300 kids out of the Hamburg orphanage and drove them out into the freezing cold toward a Nabi village. It was pure cruelty. It was awful. On Christmas Day, the French marshal delivered his ultimate merciless order. The remaining poor, the elderly, and the sick were systematically rounded up from their homes. It was early in the morning, December 25th. More than 20,000 people were driven out of the city gates, especially right through the gate called Millantor, into a blinding, freezing snowstorm. Some while later, that was so heartbreaking, watching the endless stream of people passing by their windows, desperate parents holding freezing toddlers in their arms. The citizens inside their warm homes could do nothing. They stood powerless and furious behind their glass windows. There were absolutely nothing they could do or help. No, nothing. Many of those expelled froze to death right on the cobbled streets or died of exhaustion in the snow. The survivors mostly dragged themselves to Altona, or further away to the other cities called Lübeck and Bremen, where the local population set up soup kitchens to save them. Many people died, though. In a cemetery in Altona, a memorial stone was erected over a mass grave for 1,138 Hamburg citizens who didn't survive that horrific Christmas winter. Decades later, that stone was moved here, tucked away by the pathways, where almost no one stops to look. This memorial stone. Let's take a moment. It's halftime, by the way. Are you still here? Still with me? And what about the French marshal? So cold. He focused strictly on his military plan to create a completely clear line of fire for his artillery. You won't believe. He ordered entire suburbs outside the walls to be burned to the ground. Yeah. The fortification work began in the west of the city. Gun banks were hastily installed on the top of the bastion, and heavy artillery batteries were positioned along the lower walls. Passageways and covered trenches were completely restored. Workers built up the open dirt slopes, rebuilt the hornwork, the outpost on the banks of the Elbe River, and drove a massive wooden palisade wall into the ground between the ramparts and the moat. The previously demolished Millantor, the gate, was replaced by a crude brick door gate, and access here as well at the Dammtor, the other gate, was secured once again by heavy drawbridges. To guarantee an absolute unobstructed line of fire and to prevent any surprise assaults, every single building within a distance of 500 meters, about 1,600 feet, from the ramparts was systematically set on fire and turned down. They also chopped down every single tree on and in front of the walls. All the trees, yes. Every single building within a third of a mile, right up to where we are standing, yes. Just imagine if we were to look out at the Ulster Lake right now in the year 1813, we would see nothing but stumped, chopped down trees and smoking ruins everywhere. At critical tactical points, they build lunettes, which are arrow-shaped earthworks surrounded by deep ditches, in front of the main walls to flank close-range attacks. Equally brutal and elaborate work was carried out on the eastern side of the city. For the time being, only the natural water barriers of the Ulster Lake and Elbe River lines were left in their current state. Later, however, the Lombard Bridge, Lombardsbrücke, the major bridge dividing the Ulster Lakes today, right next to the Kennedy Bridge, was reinforced with heavy wooden plank rods. They set up massive quarters for the garrison, bomb-proof underground gunpowder and ammunition magazines, and massive storehouses for food. So, inside the harbor entrances, and at the northern edge of the inner Ulster, they drove dens, sharpened rows of heavy wooden piles deep into the water, leaving only tiny, heavily guarded openings for authorized ship traffic. The remaining citizens of Hamburg were forced into hard labor to chop down their own parks and burn down parts of their own city. 600 other people and laborers were recruited. 4,000 Hamburg citizens. If you were rich enough, you were able to buy your way out. And 2,000 people from the surrounding villages were forced into hard labor. And that wasn't enough. The French began dragging women and children into the mud. Only the severely ill were exempt. If you would stood right here, by the wall, next to one of the gates, looking out toward the Elbe, bridges, and ferry docks, you would have seen, under the strict command of French artillery officers, local citizens were frantically wheeling heavy barrels of earth to build up the breastworks. Incredibly, some of the wealthier citizens were even forced to do this grueling labor while still wearing their formal top hats. January 13, in 1814, the day the French systematically set fire to the Hamburg places. Imagine looking behind the gate called Millantor and seeing a sea of flames swallowing the horizon. And right where we are, you would see terrified Hamburg citizens still being forced to dig and build under the smoke. The destruction was absolute. Even further back in the area outside the gate called Dammtor, if you stood on the famous promenade and looked across the inner Ulster Lake, everything on the horizon had been burned to the ground. Everything. By autumn, following Napoleon's crushing defeat at Leipzig, earlier forces closed in. The vulnerable eastern front of Hamburg became the top priority for reinforcement. A terrifying new danger arose as the brutal winter frost set in. The vast muddy floodplains and the Ulster meadows froze solid, turning a natural barrier into an open highway for an invading army. To block them, the French rushed to install deadly obstacles, including heavy timber palisades and massive wooden beams bristling with iron spikes. The next days, hopefully the end of French occupation. The city was completely besieged by allied troops, mostly Russians and Prussians, who were welcomed as absolute saviors by the starving, desperate population. Finally, on May 30, in 1814, the French troops marched out of Hamburg for good. The occupation was over. Hamburg had miraculously regained its independence, but it was a broken victory. The city was economically ruined, its banks were empty, and the local population had been drastically decimated by the ruthless consequences of war. By the way, you can still see the very last remains of the original curtain wall today, Cortina. You remember? Right at the edge of the park near the gate Dammtor, heading toward the Esplanade Street. Most of the former ramparts have been preserved in this western section as part of the Grand Park. And right here, the historic Rudolphus Bastion. Hey, Rudolph? Yes, it's called Rudolphus. And the massive moat in front of it are still clearly recognizable. Take a look around. And here we are, right here at the bridge. The water you see stretching out before us is the actual original moat that once protected the Rudolphus Bastion all those centuries ago. What happened next? In 1815, at the Congress of Vienna, Hamburg's independence and its status as a sovereign state were officially restored. The following years were still a struggle of rebuilding, sure. But by 1820, you could already feel a vibrant new commercial energy, with the heart of the city's social life shifting from the Elbe River to the Ulster Lake and beyond. The city finally breathed a collective sigh of relief and began to do the one thing it had missed it for years: to live again. But what about right here? What happened to this specific spot? I think I would have wanted to tear down everything that reminded me of those horrific years of occupation. What about you? Would you have kept this place? It is what it is. On the other hand, we can't just erase the past. It's always a piece of the whole story. We have to live with it. We have to deal with it. And somehow shape into something better for the future. Make the best. And that is exactly what Hamburg did. The city found a way, a park. This entire area was transformed. Welcome to a new area. Starting in 1820. Hey, we made it to 1820. 1 hour ago, we were in 1620. And now we are in 1820. Whoa! Okay, 1820. The ramparts wrapping around the city were gradually converted into Hamburg's very first public promenades. This laid the foundation for what would later become the botanical garden in today's beloved Planten and Bloem, the park. Yes, it was right here in 1821. The naturalist scientist Johann Lehmann, oh, hi Joe, another Joe, he planted a famous plane tree. Look over there. Maybe you're already waiting for me. That giant, magnificent tree over there is that very same plane tree from 1821. Standing here today, for me, it feels like that historic sip of relief has taken deep root. So, a good era was finally beginning. Sure, the road ahead wasn't easy. It's never easy. And they knew one thing. From now on, life was only moving forward, no matter how long it would take, no matter what. When I was a kid, I was told so many stories, but somehow it often just felt like a history lesson, you know? Like another world. Yeah, another world. Because it happened so long ago. That changed when an old neighbor told me that her family once owned the houses where the employees of a gardener worked. The very same people who later helped cultivate Hamburg's first botanical garden. No, it didn't start right here. No, the very first botanical garden in Hamburg was actually created much earlier, in 1810, by a private man named Joe. Yeah, another Joe. Yeah. Johann Flügge. So many Joes. That was a popular name, you know? His garden was located near the place where we were looking at the Japanese cherry blossoms along the Alster Lake the other day. Do you remember? But tragically, during the brutal winter of 1813, their garden was also completely destroyed by the French army, yes. Yet, the seeds of at least one plant were patient, the butterbur. Yes, Butterbur, butterbur. And that plant survived the destruction. Just a few hundred meters from here, around the corner, the official botanical garden was newly founded by Dr. Johann Lehmann, Joe, at the gate called Dammtor in 1821. As it grew, it moved before finally relocating in the 1970s to the green district of Klein Flottbek. Today it's known as the Loki Schmidt Garden. Maybe you heard of it before, I'm not sure. Some of you might have visited it recently for the beautiful Christmas garden light festival. I was there. And you know what? Lehmann's family later tried to plant a cutting of our famous 1821 plane tree right here, the other garden. But it never really grew because the soil contained too much clay. Is it right? Clay? We will stay here for now. So, this giant tree right next to us is over 200 years old. And directly across from us, you can see the magnificent swamp cypresses, which are already over 180 years old. Yeah. Near my favorite way into the park. Yes, my favorite. There are different main and side entrances to this park. 10 or more? Next time we are there, let's count the entrances when I show you around. This one is right next to the train station called Dammtor Station. Exactly like one of the gates, which is also my favorite train station, but that's a story for another day. To our right, you can see the tall red and blue hotel, formerly known as the Plaza, and Exhibition Center. Congress Center Hamburg, one of Europe's largest, most leading-edge convention centers. Let's stay here for a moment. Welcome to this beautiful area. It feels like you step into a completely different world. To your left are gentle water terraces. And the lounge chairs are just waiting for a soul who wants to unwind for a moment. In front of you, the beautiful rhododendron bushes welcome you. They look almost like rolling hills, so large and full of vibrant life. You can feel you are surrounded by explosions of red, rose, pink, and white, all framed by the deep green of the great trees. So many flowers, so many plants. Along this path, a tiny trail branches off to the left.
Yeah.
For a second you have to choose. Stay on the main path or venture down this little hidden detour. You can go with this or you can go with that. Go ahead. Dare to take it. Let yourself connect with this beautiful piece of nature for a moment. Just take a deep breath. What happened here after 1820? Yeah, we are not finished yet. We are officially halfway there. Now, let's jump another 200 years to the present day. Come on, 200 years. Later on, I will take you over to the Museum of Hamburg History. Let me tell you first where it is. Right on top of the farmer Bastion Henricus. Yeah, named after Henricus, one of the 22 city councillors. Remember how the bastions were named after them? It's located not far from the gate, called Millantor. And the old 1820 guardhouse we talked about earlier is still standing right there today. Yeah, exactly. Over the decades, this park became a hub for science and wonder. Starting in 1826, some people came here to observe the stars at a small observatory. However, as the city grew and the sky got too bright, yeah, it was time to move out to a darker suburb. Then, in 1851, there was a public sensation. The giant Amazon water lily, the Victoria regia, bloomed for the very first time in its own dedicated greenhouse. Yes, it was a special greenhouse for her. They call it Queen of Roses. But the giant lily eventually moved away too. The gardeners hadn't fully considered the harsh winds later. It was relocated to the other botanical garden down by the Elbe River in Kleinflottbeck. Oh, there's also a crazy story about an argument that happened, but we will save that for another time. Oh, wait. Did you hear that? Was that an elephant? No. Wait. Well, yes, it was, but not right here. At least not today in 2026. No. That sound echoes back from 1863. That's when a zoological garden opened right on these grounds. Its first director was Alfred Brehm. Yeah, Alfred. One of Germany's most famous zoologists. And later, yeah, it moved. Not to the Elbe River, no, further north, to a zoo called Hagenbeck, which is Hamburg's famous huge zoo today, about a 20-minute subway ride from here. So, what you gonna do with a park? So many plants and flowers. You host international garden shows. When the legendary garden shows took place right here in Hamburg, I wasn't even born yet. Whether it was the early ones in 1869 or 1897, or the international ones in 1953, 1963, or 1973. No, that was all my way before my time on this earth. Oh, in 1869, by the way, the very first international garden show was at a place called a park. Yeah, Elbe Park. It only lasted a few days, but it was such a weird success that the city decided to repeat the entire thing on a grand scale in 1897. That one took place right here and lasted for an incredible 6 months. In the meantime, the historic cemeteries that used to be right here in front of the gate called Dammtor were officially closed in 1879. Yeah, you're literally walking where centuries of Hamburg citizens were once laid to rest. Some of the stone steps around us still whisper that story. When the landscape architect Karl Blomen transformed this area into the Low German Garden Show in the 1930s, he actually recycled the old, abandoned headstones from those cemeteries to build the park's pathways and stone walls. Some of them. 5 years later, in 1935, the park officially received the name we use today, Planten und Blumen, which is local German dialect for plants and flowers. By 1938, the first version of the famous musical Water again was planned, but it didn't last. In 1943, during the devastating firestorms of World War II, this entire beautiful park was once again completely destroyed. 1953, Hamburg proved once again that it knows how to heal, adapt, and move forward with everything it has. Rising from the ashes of the war, the city hosted the first official international exhibition in 1953. Back then, a futuristic 35-meter high, or it's about 115 feet, glass tower called Philip's Turm. Yeah, Philip Tower. Stood right on the hill. It's no longer there today, but you can still catch a gorgeous sweeping view from that same high point. And 5 million people traveled from all over the world to see the show. This was also the moment the famous waterlight concerts we know today was rebuilt back then and expanded. The very first regular water and light concerts began, though they looked a bit different than we see the colorful waterlight concerts in the park today. Oh, and the beautiful cascade system, made of natural stones and granite, was meticulously laid out. It was designed to perfectly blend architectural design with the fluid, natural element of flowing water. Yeah, as you can still see it today. Just 10 and 20 years later, whoa, it's getting fast now. The legendary international garden shows of 1963 and 1973 arrived. By then, the little girl who would later become my mom was already running through these parts. And you won't believe what this place looked like back then. Not only did a miniature garden railway track run through the grass, yeah, a small train If you look closely into the bushes sometime, you can still spot the old rusted tracks. Kinda like that. And if you looked up into the sky in 1963, an actual cable car system was floating right above our heads. Wow! You could literally hover in a gondola high above the park. Back then, the trees were young, so the park looked very flat compared to the dense, lush green canopy we see today. That cable car ran straight across the entire grounds from Planten and Blomen all the way over to the place called Millantor. Yeah, the gate. And that old 1820 guardhouse we talked about earlier. Exactly. Wow, look at us now, slowly strolling through these deeply historical places, as if they are just a familiar, cozy neighborhood. It's amazing, isn't it? Let's walk a bit further. When spring arrives, the gorgeous magnolias bloom right here. And that's also where my favorite chairs are located. These are the famous white Ulster chairs, called Ulsterstühle, which look a lot like the American Adirondack chairs or the classic Canadian bear chairs. Way back in 1914, the Hamburg Park administration was looking for a comfortable, elegant seating option for the green spaces around the Ulster Lake. The garden director at the time, Otto, nice to meet you, Mr. Otto Lehner, introduced a model that was remarkably similar to the ones you see today. However, these Hamburg chairs are slightly more curved. And the best part? They are not, I don't know how to say that right. They are not bolted down. You can pick up your chair and move it around to chase the sun. You know what I mean? Now, we have arrived at the Mediterranean terraces, right in front of the tropical greenhouses. Will you stay here with me for a moment? Isn't it beautiful? Whenever I walk here during my lunch break, I can just switch off my mind for a bit, no matter the season. Oh, by the way, the historic tropical greenhouses are currently undergoing a restoration, which is scheduled to last until about 2029. Just like the greenhouses over in the Floodbeck Garden. Yeah, the other botanical garden. So, once again, this place is evolving and changing. Back during the last major international garden show in 1973, the city added some of the park's most popular modern features, including the roller skating and ice skating rink, as well as the large playgrounds. The ice rink is pure joy every winter. It's absolutely huge and it's wonderful to skate here. And there's something else that has been enchanting visitors ever since that 1973 exhibition I told you about earlier, the musical waterlight concerts. The waterlight system on the main park lake was completely redesigned back then, giving it the grand scale and form it still is today. Maybe you met me here on one of those warm summer evenings. When the sun set, at the end of the day, the lights turn on. Just imagine giant fountains of water shooting into the night sky, moving in perfect synchronization to classical or modern music in a symphony of brilliant colors. It is magical. Always running from May to September. It starts at 9 p.m. Let's go to the lake now. It was not until nearly a decade later in 1986 and 1987 that all these different historical sections, the old botanical garden, the Wallanlagen, the ramparts, and the various garden showgrounds were officially merged into the single, unified park we stand in today, Planten und Blomen. That's the reason why, ever since my childhood, I've only known this entire area by that one name, Planten und Blomen. Meanwhile, parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents often still refer to specific parts as Wallanlagen. But no matter which way you use to enter this park, it's always breathtaking. It's a perfect mix of history, culture, and nature. If there's one word to describe it, there's no word. I would say harmony. Yeah. And to find your own harmony and balance. Look at the flowering plants around us. You can truly feel the health of this entire ecosystem. They act as natural insect magnets. The park staff even leaves white nettles standing on purpose to protect local butterfly larvae, and chemicals or pesticides are strictly banned here. Of course, this natural approach means a lot of hard work. When white cicada, commonly known as enchantress nightshade, starts mixing aggressively among the flowers, it means the gardeners have to roll up their sleeves. They meticulously recultivate the soil by hand to let the nutrients break through. Everything here works with an immense amount of physical labor and deep mindfulness. We truly owe this beautiful park to the many dedicated gardeners, park rangers, and helping hands who care for it every single day. Nature can do so much on its own. We all know that. In its own wild, untouched spaces, nature doesn't need us humans at all. But sometimes we actually manage to build a space where humanity and nature exist in perfect harmony. There it is again, harmony. And when that happens, just like here, we need water. Do you know just how much? There are actually nearly 200 irrigation and sprinkler locations hidden throughout this park alone. They water every single flower bed, every delicate plant, and of course the grand old trees. We are walking right past one of these vibrant zones now, leaving spring behind as summer quickly approaches. Soon, this place will turn into a sweeping sea of colors, filled with begonias, geraniums, and dahlias, the crown jewels of the park's summer planting. Right now, the rhododendrons are blooming in breathtaking abundance. Look at those deep red flowers growing in brilliant tiers. They capture the sunlight so beautifully. Garden fuel red? I heard about that. I'm not sure if it's exactly these ones. Well, but nearly this place then. And if you wander further down into the southern section of the park, near the Rose Garden, you will later discover the famous Lemon Queen with its stunning, bright lemon yellow blossoms. No matter which winding path you chose to walk today, every single trail here has its own beautiful secret to offer. And right here is one of the most beautiful spots. For me, let's go there. In 1988, this Japanese garden was created by the legendary landscape architect Yoshikuni Araki. Yes, Mr. Yoshikuni Araki from Osaka. This is where poetry, death, magic, and art truly come to life. To create an entire vast world within such a small space of a city park, that is the highest form of art. I like the philosophy. Everything is done as a specific, special place. In the center of the garden, there's a Japanese tea house. Yeah, traditional centuries-old tea ceremonies from May to September. The pathways lead us past rocked stone, washing water, and perfectly still ponds, presenting you with a balance and tranquility from ever-changing perspectives. Every stone, every placement is a composition designed to bring peace, harmony, and culture right into the center of the city. I'm sitting on the small bench in front of the tea house, by the edge of the pond, looking at the trees and the magnificent magnolia in front of us. I feel grounded. This place has been a sanctuary for me since my childhood. There are many iconic landmarks in the city that remind you why Hamburg is called Gateway to the World. But right here is one of those rare, wonderful hidden spots where it feels exactly like that. Even though we aren't standing by the Elbe River or other beautiful and great places in Hamburg, now we are right now in this peaceful garden, right in the beating heart of the city. Let's just stay here for another quiet moment. I like the sunsets here. Oh, 10 minutes left. Don't miss the waterlight concerts. The park is safely locked at night and open its gates at 7 a.m. That's the time in the morning when the caretakers and friends of the park make sure, for a few hours, this sanctuary belongs strictly to the flora and fauna. This is Planten. In 2013, the entire park was officially designated as a protected historical monument. It has always connected not just the people of Hamburg, all visitors and travelers and friends from all over the world. Whenever you come to this place or sit by the lake tonight, take a look at the very path you're walking on. Just a short while ago, during our walk, we were standing back in the year 1621, surrounded by giant military mud walls. And tonight, we are in the year 2026, watching colorful fountains dance to the music, right here in this exact same spot. For a moment, I wasn't sure about the title of this episode, City Fortification. It became so deeply historical, and I'm very emotional. I thought about splitting it up and calling the next part just Planten, and this one, Fortification of Hamburg. Then I realized, no, all of it is exactly this one single place. Everything happened right here, deep beneath our feet and centuries before us, spanning over 400 years of time, always changing, always evolving with the passage of time, and just like you and me. Like we always find a way to keep moving forward in life. Things keep moving forward here too. This is a story that never truly ends. This is the park right in the middle of the city. Thank you so much for being here with me. Over 400 years. Wow. and have a good night or have a good day wherever you are. See you next time. How about something delicious? Have you ever heard of Franzbrötchen? It's a really light pastry. I will tell you all about it next time.